Betty Broderick's story is a chilling example of how betrayal, resentment, and unresolved emotional pain can escalate into tragedy. Once a devoted wife and mother, Betty dedicated over 16 years of her life to supporting her husband, Dan Broderick, through law school and into his legal career. She managed the household, raised their 4 children, and sacrificed her own ambitions to ensure his success. Yet, despite her efforts, their marriage crumbled. Dan began an affair with a younger woman, Linda Kolkina, and Betty felt not only hurt but humiliated. What followed was a bitter divorce that became highly public and deeply contentious, with the courtroom battles, custody disputes, and intense emotional conflict. Friends and family witnessed a woman increasingly consumed by anger and a sense of injustice, her resentment growing with each perceived slight. Betty's experience demonstrates how long-term emotional strain, when combined with feelings of betrayal and loss, can push someone toward extreme, destructive behavior. On November 5, 1989, that simmering anger reached its horrifying climax. Betty Broderick went to Dan and Linda's La Jolla home and shot them while they slept. Linda was killed instantly, while Dan survived the attack, physically injured, and left with the trauma of surviving a calculated act of violence in his own home. The murder shocked the nation. Betty, once seen as a devoted mother and wife, became the focus of intense media scrutiny and public debate. Her actions were widely analyzed, raising difficult questions about the nature of obsession, revenge, and the psychological impact of betrayal. The case illustrated that domestic and emotional conflicts, when left unresolved, can escalate beyond argument and legal disputes into lethal consequences. It also highlighted the vulnerabilities within relationships affected by infidelity and high-conflict divorces, showing how emotional turmoil can manifest in dangerous and irreversible ways. The trial that followed reflected the complex emotional and legal dimensions of the case. Betty's defense argued that years of emotional distress, humiliation, and betrayal drove her to commit the crime, emphasizing the psychological pressure she had endured during the divorce and her subsequent struggle to cope. The prosecution, however, presented evidence of premeditation, portraying Betty as deliberate in her actions and determined in her plan to exact revenge. Ultimately, she was convicted of second-degree murder for the death of Linda Kolkina and attempted murder for shooting Dan Broderick, receiving a sentence of 32 years to life in prison. Over the decades, Betty's story has remained in the public consciousness through books, documentaries, and dramatizations, offering both a cautionary tale and a case study in the devastating effects of unresolved anger and emotional trauma. The tragedy serves as a reminder of the destructive power of obsession, the consequences of escalating personal conflicts, and the far-reaching impact of violence on families and communities. Betty Broderick's life and actions are sobering evidence that unresolved emotional pain, if left unchecked, can culminate in irreversible and devastating outcomes. In the quiet, affluent suburb of Friendswood, Texas, Dr. Clara Harris seemed to have it all. A respected dentist born in Colombia, she had built a successful life with her husband, orthodontist Dr. David Lynn Harris, raising twin sons and David's teenage daughter from a previous marriage. On the surface, their lives were the picture of stability and comfort, a family admired in their community. But beneath that facade, their marriage was fraying, torn apart by suspicion, betrayal, and mounting obsession. By mid-2002, Clara's doubts about David's fidelity had evolved into an all-consuming fixation. What began as uncertainty became a relentless, burning anger. On the night of July 24, 2002, that anger exploded in a way no one could have anticipated. After uncovering David's affair with his receptionist, Gail Bridges, Clara acted with meticulous determination, following the trail laid out by the private investigator she had hired to watch him. She drove to the Nassau Bay Hilton, the very hotel where she and David had been married a decade earlier, her heart racing, mind consumed with rage. Inside the lobby, witnesses saw Clara confront Bridges, striking her in a fit of fury before hotel staff intervened and escorted her outside. But the confrontation did not end there. Moments later, as David and Bridges exited the building, Clara accelerated her silver Mercedes-Benz across the parking lot. The first impact sent David flying roughly 25 feet. Prosecutors later revealed that Clara circled the lot, crossed 2 grassy medians, and ran over him again, deliberately, stopping the car on top of his body. Her 16-year-old stepdaughter, Lindsay, sat in the passenger seat, screaming for her to stop, powerless as the violence unfolded before her eyes. The entire incident was captured on videotape by the very investigators Clara had hired, footage that would become a central piece of the prosecution's case. David was pronounced dead at the scene, and Clara was arrested shortly afterward. The nation was stunned. A woman, once celebrated for her professionalism and motherhood, had transformed in a matter of minutes into the perpetrator of one of the most shocking acts of marital revenge in Texas history. At trial, prosecutors painted a portrait of deliberate malice, emphasizing Clara's recorded admission that she wanted to hurt her husband. The defense argued that the killing was accidental, the product of sudden passion, claiming the car could not have been maneuvered to strike him multiple times. But witnesses, including Lindsay, testified that Clara had run over David 3 separate times, and portions of the video, combined with her police interview, revealed her rage and lack of remorse. On February 14, 2003, the day that would have marked their 11th wedding anniversary, Clara was convicted of murder under the sudden passion clause and sentenced to 20 years in prison and a $1,000 fine. During her incarceration at the Mountain View unit in Gatesville, Texas, she reportedly spent her time transcribing school textbooks into Braille. Her twin sons were raised by family friends, while her stepdaughter and David's parents filed wrongful death lawsuits, resulting in multi-million-dollar settlements. After serving 15 years, Clara was granted parole in 2017 and walked free on May 11, 2018, completing parole supervision in February 2023. She emerged subdued, yet smiling, stepping back into the world after committing one of the most infamous revenge killings in modern American history. The case left an indelible mark on public consciousness, a chilling testament to how betrayal, obsession, and unchecked rage can transform even the most familiar lives into scenes of unspeakable violence. The story of Travis Alexander and Jodi Arias does not begin like a horror movie or a crime documentary, but like an ordinary modern romance, the kind that starts with smiles, long phone calls, and the hopeful belief that love can fix anything. They met at a work conference in 2006, clicked quickly, and fell into an intense, whirlwind relationship that friends later described as passionate, dramatic, and exhausting all at once. Travis was charismatic, deeply religious and ambitious, the sort of guy who set goals and chased them hard, while Jodi came across as charming and attentive, eager to be part of his world. At first, everything looked picture perfect, but cracks formed fast. Their relationship turned into an emotional roller coaster of breakups, reconciliations, jealousy, and constant arguments, the kind of toxic push and pull where neither person truly walks away. Friends warned Travis that Jodi seemed possessive and unpredictable, and over time the tension grew thicker, like a storm cloud that never quite cleared. Even after they officially broke up, they kept talking, texting, meeting in secret, blurring the line between exes and something more complicated, and that lingering connection would later make the events feel even more tragic. In June 2008, Travis was found dead in the shower of his Mesa, Arizona home, and the scene investigators walked into was shocking even by homicide standards. He had been stabbed dozens of times, his throat deeply slashed, and he had also been shot in the head, an amount of violence that detectives often call overkill, the kind fueled by rage rather than impulse. It was not just a killing, but a furious, personal attack, the sort that suggests intense emotion behind every blow. The house told its own story, with blood, chaos, and a camera that accidentally captured photos from the day of the murder, images that would later become chilling pieces of evidence. Suspicion quickly turned toward Jodi when she offered shifting explanations, first denying she was there, then blaming masked intruders, and eventually claiming self-defense. Each version seemed to crumble under scrutiny, and the inconsistencies only made the case darker and more complicated. What followed was not just an investigation but a media spectacle, with interrogations, phone records, and courtroom testimony dissected in public, turning the tragedy into headline news across the country. The trial stretched on for months and felt less like a straightforward case and more like a psychological drama, as jurors and viewers tried to understand how a once loving relationship had spiraled into something so destructive. Prosecutors painted Jodi as calculating and obsessed, someone who could not accept rejection and acted out of jealousy and revenge, while the defense argued fear and survival, insisting she fought back against an attack. The truth, however, seemed buried under layers of manipulation, heartbreak, and conflicting memories. Ultimately, the jury convicted her of first-degree murder, and she was sentenced to life in prison, bringing legal closure but not emotional peace for those who knew Travis. What lingers most about this case is not just the brutality, but how ordinary it all began. How something that started with dates and dreams ended in irreversible violence. It serves as a sobering reminder that unhealthy relationships can quietly escalate, that warning signs matter, and that sometimes the most dangerous stories are the ones that look normal at first glance, until suddenly they are anything but. On May 23, 2014, a quiet coastal town near the University of California, Santa Barbara, was ripped apart by one of the most horrifying acts of revenge in modern memory. Isla Vista, usually filled with the laughter of students and the casual hum of late classes, became the stage for a meticulously planned massacre. The orchestrator was 22-year-old Elliot Rodger, the son of a Hollywood filmmaker who had grown up in privilege yet carried a festering hatred beneath the surface. Rodger's resentment toward women had been building for years, fueled by rejection, envy, and a sense of entitlement. Diagnosed in childhood with developmental disorders, he had struggled to connect with people, and his isolation only deepened his anger. Over time, he became obsessed with his own perceived injustices, venting in online forums filled with misogynistic ideology and chronicling his rage in journals and videos. These dark writings culminated in a manifesto, My Twisted World, in which he openly plotted a day of retribution against a world he believed had wronged him. In the months leading up to the massacre, Rodger carefully prepared. Between 2012 and 2014, he legally purchased 3 semi-automatic pistols and ammunition, honed his aim at gun ranges, and practiced stabbing motions on pillows and bedsheets. Disturbing videos he uploaded to YouTube caught the attention of a mental health worker, but nothing stopped him. His parents, unaware of the scale of his plans, would later learn the devastating truth too late. That evening, Rodger struck inside his Isla Vista apartment. Armed with 2 hunting knives, he ambushed his roommates, Weihan David Wong and Chongyuan James Hong, killing them with brutal precision. George Chen, a friend visiting the apartment, was stabbed 94 times in a frenzy of violence. After the attacks, Rodger calmly cleaned himself, wrote a final journal entry, and uploaded a chilling video to YouTube, announcing his hatred toward the world and his plan to punish women for rejecting him and men for living lives he envied. Then he drove to the Alpha Phi sorority house, a target chosen because he deemed its residents the most beautiful women on campus. Locked out and frustrated, he opened fire on 3 women walking nearby. 2, Catherine Cooper and Veronica Weiss, were killed despite desperate efforts to save them. A third survived, but with life-changing injuries. He continued his rampage, shooting through the windows of a deli and killing Christopher Michaels Martinez, a 20-year-old student, before barreling through the streets, striking pedestrians and exchanging gunfire with police. The terror lasted barely 10 minutes, leaving 6 dead and 14 injured. Rodger ended his life after crashing his vehicle, leaving a town reeling and a community forever scarred. The aftermath was devastating. Families sued local authorities and property managers, claiming clear warning signs were ignored. Rodger's writings became a disturbing inspiration for extremist incel communities, alarming law enforcement and researchers. In response, California passed the nation's first red flag law, allowing authorities to remove firearms from individuals deemed dangerous. More than a decade later, the Isla Vista massacre remains one of the most chilling, revenge-driven killings ever recorded, a haunting reminder of how entitlement, hatred, and inaction can converge into unimaginable tragedy. The murder of Shanda Sharer is one of the most disturbing and tragic examples of teenage violence in American history. Shanda was a 12-year-old girl from Indiana whose life was cut short by a group of older teenage girls motivated by jealousy, romantic rivalries, and personal grudges. The circumstances of the crime reveal a calculated and premeditated level of cruelty that is almost unimaginable, particularly given the ages of both the victim and the perpetrators. Shanda, a typical middle school student, became the target of these girls' anger simply because she was associated, however indirectly, with a perceived rival in a love triangle. The tension among the teenagers escalated into an obsession, culminating in a plan to kidnap and harm Shanda. This tragic case demonstrates how unchecked emotions such as envy and resentment can manifest in violent and irreversible actions, even among young people. The events of the night of the murder are horrifying in their deliberate cruelty. Melinda Loveless, the central figure in the crime, along with Lori Tackett, Hope Rippey, and Tony Lawrence, lured Shanda from her home under false pretenses, creating the illusion of safety before subjecting her to captivity and prolonged abuse. Shanda was physically and psychologically tortured over the course of several hours. Witness accounts and trial evidence highlighted the deliberate nature of the violence. This was not a spontaneous outburst, but a meticulously planned attack. The attacker's intent to inflict fear, pain, and humiliation on Shanda reflects a depth of malice and premeditation rarely seen at such a young age. While jealousy and rivalry may seem like common adolescent emotions, the extremity of their actions underscores how destructive and dangerous such feelings can become when amplified by poor judgment, peer influence, and a lack of empathy. The culmination of the crime, in which Shanda was set on fire, ended her life in a manner that was both violent and tragic. The brutality of the act shocked the local community and the nation, leaving an indelible mark on public consciousness. Following the murder, the legal system responded by charging the perpetrators as adults, reflecting the severity of the crime and the conscious intent behind it. The trial revealed not only the harrowing details of the night of the murder, but also the psychological and social dynamics that had contributed to such extreme behavior. This case prompted broader discussions about adolescent mental health, the warning signs of violent tendencies, and the societal factors that can lead young people to commit acts of extreme aggression. Shanda's death continues to serve as a somber reminder of the devastating consequences of unchecked anger, envy, and premeditated cruelty among youth. Reflecting on the murder of Shanda Sharer, it becomes clear that this was a case in which ordinary teenage emotions escalated into extraordinary violence with fatal consequences. The combination of jealousy, peer influence, and deliberate planning resulted in a level of brutality that left a community grieving and a nation questioning how such a crime could occur. Shanda's life, abruptly ended at 12, serves as a stark warning about the potential for destructive behavior when empathy and moral judgment are absent. The case remains a critical reference in discussions of adolescent violence, premeditation, and the societal responsibility to recognize and address early warning signs of harmful behavior. It is a tragic story that continues to resonate, underscoring the importance of awareness, intervention, and prevention in protecting vulnerable young individuals from similar fates. Amy Bishop had long been recognized for her intelligence and ambition, a Harvard-trained geneticist and assistant professor at the University of Alabama in Huntsville. By 2010, however, the brilliance that had earned her academic respect was shadowed by growing tension and instability. Colleagues described her as unpredictable, abrasive, and at times deeply unsettling, a woman whose sharp mind was matched by an equally sharp resentment toward anyone she believed had wronged her. At 44, married and the mother of 4, Bishop faced the loss of her academic career after being denied tenure in March 2009. Appeals had failed, leaving her position and her professional identity on the line. Those around her noticed a dangerous shift. She became increasingly fixated on perceived slights, professional obstacles, and the idea that her brilliance had been unjustly overlooked. The stage was set for an act that would shock her colleagues and the academic world alike. On February 12, 2010, Bishop attended a routine biology department faculty meeting in the Shelby Center for Science and Technology. About 12 colleagues were present. For the first 30 or 40 minutes, she appeared calm, almost ordinary, until the moment shattered everything. Without warning, she drew a Ruger P95 9mm handgun and began firing methodically at those closest to her. 3 faculty members, Dr. Gopi Podila, Dr. Maria Ragland Davis, and Dr. Adriel Johnson, were killed instantly. 3 others, including Dr. Joseph Lay, Assistant Professor Luis Cruz Vera, and staff aide Stephanie Montecchiolo, sustained serious injuries. Survivors later described the attack as execution style, noting how Bishop targeted her victims deliberately, rather than shooting at random. Deborah Morariti, a biochemistry professor, narrowly avoided becoming a 7th victim. When Bishop's handgun jammed, Morariti lunged, grabbing at her legs and helping others push Bishop from the room and block the door. Bishop was apprehended shortly afterward outside the building, reportedly in denial, insisting her colleagues were still alive. The shooting was not an isolated act of violence. Bishop's past revealed a disturbing pattern of aggression and erratic behavior. In 1986, she had fatally shot her 18-year-old brother Seth in Massachusetts, a death initially ruled accidental, though later scrutiny suggested probable cause for criminal charges. In 1993, she and her husband had been questioned in connection with a pipe bomb incident targeting a former supervisor and additional confrontations, including a 2002 altercation at a restaurant, reflected her long-standing difficulty managing anger. Within UAH, Bishop had developed a reputation for unsettling classroom behavior, alienating students, dismissing graduate researchers from her lab, and generating multiple complaints over her teaching style. Though her academic accomplishments were notable, interpersonal conflicts and disputes over tenure had left her increasingly isolated, frustrated, and bitter. The aftermath of the Huntsville shootings was devastating. Bishop faced charges of capital murder and attempted murder. In September 2012, she pleaded guilty, avoiding the death penalty, and was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Survivors, including Joseph Lay, bore lifelong physical and psychological scars, Lay suffering traumatic brain injury and partial blindness. In response, UAH implemented sweeping campus safety reforms, including mandatory background checks for faculty, emergency alert systems, and the creation of a behavioral evaluation and threat assessment team to monitor staff exhibiting concerning behaviors. Memorial services honored Podila, Davis, and Johnson, drawing thousands who mourned the loss of brilliant lives cut short. Bishop's actions reopened scrutiny of her past, including her brother's death, illustrating the devastating consequences of unresolved psychological instability compounded by resentment and access to firearms. Across academia, the tragedy of February 12, 2010, remains one of the most horrific revenge-driven killings in recent history, a stark reminder of how personal grievances and professional disputes, when left unchecked, can erupt into unimaginable violence. The Bath School Massacre of May 18, 1927, stands as one of the most shocking tragedies in American history, and it remains the deadliest act of school violence in the United States. At the center of this horrific event was Andrew Kehoe, a 55-year-old farmer and local school board treasurer, whose growing resentment toward the community culminated in unimaginable violence. Kehoe had long been struggling with financial difficulties, including the impending foreclosure of his farm, which he attributed to rising taxes, and the costs associated with the newly built Bath Consolidated School. Compounding his frustrations, he had recently lost a local election for township clerk, intensifying his sense of grievance. Over time, these personal and financial setbacks festered into a dangerous obsession, as Kehoe developed a plan to exact revenge on the community he felt had wronged him. Kehoe's preparation for the attack was methodical and deliberate. reflecting a disturbing combination of patience, calculation, and cruelty. For months, he secretly planted explosives, dynamite and pyritol throughout the school building, carefully embedding them in the walls and under the floors in areas where they would not be detected. His own property was similarly rigged with explosives, including his house and farm buildings. On the morning of May 18th, Kehoe first detonated explosives at his home and farm, killing his wife and setting fires that caused additional destruction. He then drove to the Bath Consolidated School and, once inside, triggered the explosives he had meticulously placed over weeks. The resulting devastation was immediate and catastrophic. 38 people were killed, including 38 children, and dozens more were injured. The horror of the day was compounded by the knowledge that the attack was entirely preventable. Had Kehoe's intentions been noticed or intervention taken earlier, the tragedy was further intensified by Kehoe's ability to exploit his position within the community. As the school board treasurer, he was a trusted figure with routine access to the school. This trust allowed him to carry out his plan without suspicion, demonstrating the insidious danger of someone who combines authority, grievance, and patience in such a destructive way. Kehoe did not attempt to escape after the attack. Instead, he drove away and took his own life by detonating explosives in his car, bringing his campaign of destruction to a grimly deliberate conclusion. The aftermath left Bath Township in shock, mourning the loss of children and teachers, grappling with the scale of devastation, and confronting a profound sense of betrayal from someone they had trusted. The Bath School Massacre is a sobering reminder of how personal grievances, if left unchecked and combined with access to lethal tools, can escalate into acts of extreme violence. Unlike modern mass shootings, which often unfold in moments, this attack was planned over months with careful attention to detail, reflecting both premeditation and a deeply rooted sense of revenge. The incident forced communities to reconsider the nature of threats from within, emphasizing the importance of vigilance, mental health awareness, and understanding the warning signs of someone who may harbor dangerous resentment. Kehoe's actions left an indelible mark on American history, demonstrating that the consequences of unchecked anger and calculated malice can be catastrophic, particularly when aimed at the most vulnerable members of a community, its children. The massacre continues to be studied as both a historical event and a cautionary tale about the devastating potential of human rage. The quiet suburban streets of Markham, Ontario seemed peaceful, but beneath the surface, dark currents ran through one family's life. Jennifer Pan, 24, the daughter of Vietnamese Chinese immigrants, had grown up under relentless pressure. Her parents, Beatrice and Bin Pan, had fled Vietnam as refugees and built a household of discipline and high expectations, demanding excellence in academics, music, and sports. Every move Jennifer made was scrutinized. Dating, parties, or rebellion were forbidden. Outwardly, she appeared perfectly polished, obedient, and beautiful, but behind closed doors, resentment festered, simmering like a storm waiting to break. Jennifer cultivated a secret life. She forged report cards, lied about attending university, and maintained a hidden relationship with her boyfriend, Daniel Wong. Over time, the web of deception grew darker, twisted by a desire for freedom and control. On the night of November 8, 2010, the Pan household erupted into terror. Jennifer, who had meticulously orchestrated every detail, unlocked the door to 3 armed men she had hired. They entered under the guise of a robbery, dragging her parents to the basement. Heads covered, her parents were shot repeatedly. Beatrice Pan was killed instantly, struck in the head. Ben survived, but was left permanently blind. Jennifer emerged, seemingly unharmed, claiming she had been tied up and forced to witness the attack, even dialing 911 as her father screamed from the basement. At first, police treated it as a random home invasion, puzzled by the untouched valuables and Jennifer's safety. But the truth was far more sinister. Investigators uncovered the meticulous planning behind the massacre. Jennifer had orchestrated the attack to seize control of her parents' finances and escape the strict confines of her upbringing. Her boyfriend, Daniel Wong, along with Lenford Crawford, David Mylvaganam, and Eric Carty, played roles in arranging the deadly plot, though who fired the fatal shots remains unknown. Text messages exchanged in the hours leading up to the attack, along with her father's testimony, revealed the manipulation and calculated deceit behind every move. Bin, recovering from a coma, recalled seeing Jennifer speaking casually with one of the intruders, an image that shattered her story of fear and helplessness. The evidence painted a chilling portrait: years of resentment, a desire for autonomy twisted into lethal vengeance, and financial greed that made murder seem like a solution. The legal fallout was complex and drawn out. Jennifer and her co-conspirators were convicted of first-degree murder, attempted murder, and conspiracy, receiving life sentences with parole eligibility after 25 years. Eric Carty later died in prison, while appeals stretched over a decade, culminating in 2025 when the Supreme Court of Canada upheld much of the case but ordered retrials on some charges. Through it all, the consequences were devastating. Beatrice Pan was laid to rest in November 2010, while Bin's injuries barred him from attending her funeral. Felix Pan, Jennifer's younger brother, severed all contact with her, obtaining a restraining order. The story of Jennifer Pan remains one of Canada's most disturbing revenge killings, a stark reminder of how deception, resentment, and obsession can erupt into unspeakable violence even within the most intimate family bonds. From the outside, the Hart family looked like something straight out of a feel-good road trip movie, the kind with sun-drenched photos, matching smiles, and captions about love, equality, and adventure. Jennifer and Sarah Hart, a married couple from Washington State, regularly posted pictures of their 6 adopted children hiking through forests, dancing at music festivals, holding free hugs, signs at protests, and piling into their SUV for yet another cross-country journey. Friends online saw a progressive, happy, tightly bonded family that seemed determined to prove that love could fix anything. One image even went viral, showing young Devonte Hart tearfully hugging a police officer during a protest, turning him into a symbol of unity and compassion. To thousands of strangers scrolling through their feeds, the Harts looked inspiring, almost unreal in their wholesomeness. But like many things that look too perfect on the internet, the truth behind the filter was much darker and far less comforting. Behind closed doors, neighbors and teachers began noticing small, uneasy details that didn't match the cheerful posts. The children sometimes appeared withdrawn or unusually hungry. Some reportedly asked neighbors for food or said they were being punished by having meals withheld. Others described strict discipline, isolation, and fear of getting in trouble. Over the years, Child Protective Services in multiple states received complaints and opened investigations, yet nothing seemed to stick long enough to permanently change the situation. Each time concerns grew, the family simply moved somewhere new, resetting the story and rebuilding the same polished online image. Meanwhile, the kids kept smiling for the camera. The contrast between the public persona and private reality felt like a slow-building storm cloud, the kind you sense before the sky finally breaks. That break came in March 2018. After fresh reports of neglect surfaced and authorities planned another welfare check, the Harts abruptly packed up and left home, driving south along the California coast. For days, no one knew exactly where they were headed. Then, on a stretch of Highway 1 in Mendocino County, Jennifer Hart's SUV suddenly accelerated off a cliff and plunged roughly 100 feet onto the rocky shoreline below. Investigators later found no skid marks, no sign of braking, and toxicology results showed Jennifer had been drinking. The conclusion was chilling and painfully clear. It wasn't an accident. It was intentional. Jennifer and Sarah died in the crash, along with most of the children, and several of the children's bodies were never recovered, presumed lost to the ocean. Authorities ruled it a murder-suicide, believing Jennifer chose to end everyone's lives rather than face the possibility of losing custody and being exposed. What makes the Hart family case linger in people's minds isn't just the tragedy itself, but the unsettling lesson it leaves behind. It's the reminder that curated photos and heartfelt captions don't always tell the truth, that a smiling family portrait can hide suffering just outside the frame. It exposed gaps in the child welfare system, missed warning signs, and how easily appearances can fool entire communities. The story starts like a bright, adventurous road trip, full of hashtags and hope, but it ends in a way that feels heavy and quiet, like the sound of waves crashing against an empty cliff. And that contrast between the life they showed the world and the reality those children lived is what makes the Hart family murders not just shocking, but heartbreakingly real. In 2005, Gazala Khan, an 18-year-old Danish woman of Pakistani descent, lived under the suffocating weight of her family's rigid expectations. Born in Denmark on October 29, 1986, she spent much of her formative years in Pakistan, helping care for her ailing grandfather while navigating the strict codes of a traditional Punjabi household. Quiet and introspective, Gazala had always been torn between duty and desire, between the life her family demanded of her and the life she yearned to live. Her family, steeped in conservative values, expected obedience, and their watchful eyes left little room for personal freedom. Every choice, every action, was measured against the invisible bar of honor, obedience, and reputation. Amid these suffocating restrictions, a spark of hope appeared in the form of Isla Khan, an Afghan-born man living in Denmark. Over 3 years, their love blossomed in secrecy. They met discreetly in Copenhagen, exchanged furtive messages, and nurtured a bond that had to remain hidden from a family whose wrath Gazala knew could be deadly. To her, Isla represented freedom, choice, and the life she had been denied. To her family, however, he was an affront to their culture, a challenge to the rules that governed every aspect of their lives. Her fears were tragically justified. In February 2005, when Gazala confessed her feelings to her mother, she was met with brutal punishment. Both her mother and older brother, Akhtar Abbas, physically attacked her, leaving her bruised and shaken. The family, seeking to correct her defiance, isolated her from the outside world, cutting off the fragile connections that had given her hope. Yet, Gazala refused to relinquish her desire for independence and love. On September 5, 2005, she fled her home to live with Isla and stay with friends, seeking safety from the suffocating oppression she could no longer endure. She repeatedly sought police protection, desperate for intervention, but her pleas went unanswered. On September 21, 2005, Gazala and Isla quietly married at the registry office in Middle Fart, claiming their right to live as they chose, however briefly. For a moment, it seemed as if the couple could escape the shadow of her family's control. But the reprieve was short-lived. 2 days later, on September 23rd, the threat that had loomed over Gazala her entire life became terrifyingly real. Lured to Slagos railway station under the pretense of reconciliation, the couple walked into a meticulously planned trap. The ambush was orchestrated by her father, Ghulam Abbas, and 9 relatives and associates, who coordinated their movements with precision through constant mobile communication. As Gazala and Isla approached, Akhtar Abbas stepped forward and opened fire. Gazala was killed instantly, collapsing in the station square in full view of horrified bystanders. Isla was struck twice in the abdomen, fighting for his life, but survived after emergency surgery. A bystander narrowly avoided being hit by stray bullets, a random brush with death underscoring the chaotic brutality of the attack. Investigations revealed the calculated and chilling nature of the murder. Ghulam Abbas, a 57-year-old taxi driver who had lived in Denmark since 1970, had ordered the killing to restore what he saw as the family's lost honor. Other family members and friends, including uncles Waliat Khan and Agar Ali, Aunt Pervin Khan, and associates Ghulam Ahmed, Ansurik Iqbal, and Nawed Sharif, played active roles in tracking the couple, coordinating their movements, and executing the deadly trap. Phone records detailed hundreds of calls in the days leading up to the attack, painting a portrait of careful planning, driven by patriarchal obsession and rigid adherence to a code of honor that sanctioned violence as punishment. The legal aftermath was equally historic. On June 27, 2006, Denmark's Eastern High Court convicted all 9 participants of murder and attempted murder. Sentences ranged from 8 years to life imprisonment, with several non-Danish citizens permanently deported. Ghulam Abbas received a life sentence, while Akhtar Abbas was sentenced to 16 years. The court emphasized the premeditated nature of the crime, setting a precedent in Western Europe for how honor killings would be prosecuted in the future. Gazala Khan's death remains one of Europe's most notorious honor-based revenge murders, a tragic reminder of how patriarchal control and rigid cultural codes can escalate into deadly violence.